This is a Fight for Others production, bringing you the stories that matter. Pitter patter, let's get at her. The teachers' unions in Ontario are slamming the Ford government's proposed increase to class averages, all while asking for a 2% annual raise to keep up with inflation. So which issue is more important to teachers? Let's take a deeper look. From 2003 to the 2016 school year, schools have seen a decrease in class size averages. I'm going to use the Toronto District School Board as a barometer for the rest of Ontario in this video, as Toronto contains the largest concentrated population in Ontario. From 2008 to 2016, not a single year has had an average of 25 students or more in the classroom, with most boards having less than 1% of their classroom at 25 students or more. All of this has been happening as a result of Canadians not having as many children, and therefore there is less students to enroll in the system. Now let us take a look at one key aspect on this chart that Toronto CTV News pulls from the Ministry of Education's website. Almost all of the class size averages have shifted to being 20 or fewer students, with most classrooms hovering around the 20 or fewer student mark. According to the Ministry of Education stats, classrooms in Ontario that had 20 or fewer students accounted for roughly 90% of all the classrooms in Ontario. This means almost all class size averages in Ontario are around 20 or fewer students. With this being said, I don't think it's unreasonable to increase class sizes to be in tune with other provincial averages. Alberta has a recommended target of 27 students, according to the Alberta Teachers Association, and Quebec has a class size average of 32 students, according to an article in the Montreal Gazette. Even with larger class sizes, all three of these provinces post similar scores on the EQAO, with Ontario having the smallest classes and scoring the worst. It's worth noting at this point in the video that while the union likes to say that Ford will increase class size averages for all students, he's only committed to doing so for high school students. Here's an excerpt from a CBC article illustrating that point. The province has committed to maintaining class size caps for kindergarten and primary grades. The increase would align Ontario more closely to other jurisdictions across Canada. Now let's take a look at an excerpt from a Fraser Institute study on secondary class sizes. Ontario is currently phasing in an increase in its board-wide grades 9 to 12 average from 22 to 28 students. This will still be below British Columbia's stipulated average of 30 and Quebec's average of 32 students, but a little above Alberta's recommended target of 27 students. Ontario's planned reduction will produce significant financial savings. Here's an excerpt from an article from CTV News Toronto. The proposal adds that while teachers are instrumental to student success, they are still among the highest paid in Canada, with an average annual salary of $92,900 in the 2018 to 2019 school year. If inflation were to track at 2% per year, a 2% salary increase in each year would have an annualized cost of approximately $1.5 billion for all teachers and education workers at the end of the 4-year term of the collective agreement, the proposal states. The initial bargaining proposal has been panned by the union, which argues that the government has its facts wrong. The OSSTF says the average annual salary for its members is $86,682 and that a 1% increase would not be enough. And here's where I agree with the government's previous position they laid out for the unions on why they effectively need to not give a 2% raise. Ontario's subnational debt in 2019-2020 is projected to be $360 billion, the highest of any jurisdiction in the world. If the Ford government is indeed serious and intends to use the money to pay down the debt, then I can get behind the freeze on the raises. By not giving the 2% raise annually to keep up with inflation, as teacher unions have so often sounded the horn on, the government would have upwards of $750 million annually, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy. That's $750 million annually to either pay down debt or hire more nurses to deal with the ever-increasing problem of hallway medicine here in Ontario. Here's an excerpt from the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario's website. Figures released today by the Canadian Institute for Health Information, or CIHI, show that Ontario has the worst registered nurse to population ratio in Canada. The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario calculations based on CIHI figures show the province has only 669 registered nurses per 100,000 people, compared to 828 registered nurses per 100,000 people across the rest of Canada. I believe it's worth mentioning, if any public sector employee deserves a raise above 1%, it's our nurses here in Ontario who currently earn 17% less than the national average, according to Indeed.com. In addition, if the government caves to 2% for the teachers, they will have to raise the cap of 1% increases for all public sector jobs over the next 3 years. If teachers have one argument they can stand on, it's likely the e-learning courses. This is where they could present a great argument against the Ford government about potential harm to students. But that's not the argument they're leading with. Please consider subscribing.
Because I spit hot fire.